Hi guys, welcome to Signal Path. Today we are talking about the Enzo from Meris. The Enzo is a kind of audio-based synthesizer that does a number of really incredible things, but essentially without needing a MIDI pickup, without needing really too much in the way of additional kit. You're able to take a sound source, typically a guitar, and turn it into a fully fledged synthesizer with filter envelopes, with controls for note sustain, filter type, filter cutoff, even oscillator modulation. It has a two-tap delay on board as well. It is really a complete suite of synthesized sounds. If you're somebody like me who doesn't have the budget or the room to have a wall full of synthesizers, but love to incorporate synths into your setup and kind of tonal palette, the Enzo is an incredible resource for that. It allows you to access a number of different sounds, from bass mono synth to polysynth swells to arpeggiated synth, and even some things that blur the lines between guitar and synthesized sound in the dry mode, which we'll talk about in the demo. There's some really incredible options for you in terms of reinterpreting what you're playing and the notes that you're using, both in ways that replace your guitar and ways that complement your guitar. If you followed the channel recently, you probably have kind of seen my journey with sounds that are sort of a reinterpretation or a synthesist's approach to guitar. I really love low pass filter as a replacement for volume pedals and as just a way to like obfuscate sound without necessarily changing the overall fundamental timbre. One thing I love is that while this majors on synthesizer, that's sort of its main game, the synth off mode, that dry mode, allows you to modulate your dry tone. It allows you to apply the filter to your dry tone. It allows you to pitch shift your dry tone in really neat ways. I've found that this is something that comes out for ambient swells and ambient sounds. It's something that comes out for really aggressive kind of rock lead sounds. If you're a fan of Muse, that's been coming up a lot on the channel for some reason. But Muse-like tones, if you've ever heard the intro to MK Ultra, this thing does that, and it does it really in a really neat way, in a really like easy to set up way. Not necessarily that's what this is aimed at, but it can complement lead tones. It can thicken up things that you just want a subtle sort of pitch shifted complement to. There's a lot of really incredible uses. I think this is something that if you're into ambient guitar, or if you're just looking for something that is inspiring and kind of a companion on your pedal board that massively swings the door open to a new palette of sounds, I think the Enzo is a great option. So let's dive into it. All right, let's take a look at the Enzo. I'm playing a Balaguer Ambient Espada Select through the Cali 76 Stacked Edition and the Sick As Overdrive. It sounds like this. And here's the Enzo. The Enzo has 4 modes. You're hearing the polyphonic mode, which allows me to play chords and kind of reinterpret and resynthesize using a variety of parameters, including the pitch, filter, envelope, and others. Let's go quickly through the 4 modes. Where poly mode is polyphonic, mono is monophonic, and it sounds like this. The advantage of this mode is that it allows you to do really cool things with portamento, with filter envelope, and really create kind of vocal and interesting melodies based on what you feed it in terms of playing. When both the poly and mono modes are lit, you get one of my favorite components of this entire device, which is the arpeggiator mode. can feed it a set of notes and it will kind of cycle through monophonically. And then finally, dry mode. And dry mode allows you to take the effects from the Enzo and apply them to your dry signal. So that's modulation, it's filter, it's pitch shifting, and it's delay. We'll go through this in depth, but let's go through the mechanics of what's available to you in terms of parameters and things that you can affect within the pedal. Start this with polyphonic mode. First off, you have the ability to affect pitch. You have a 2-octave range in both directions. 2 octaves down, 2 octaves up. And this can be really useful in terms of creating separation from your guitar if you want to go through a partial mix sound. At about 50-50 on guitar and synth, it sounds like this. The other direction, an octave down. There's a lot of really beautiful and cinematic ways to use this. Next up we have the filter. And as you've heard me kind of move it along a little bit, this knob opens and closes the filter. There are a few ways to control the filter, of course manually like I just showed, but there's also an envelope that can either affect the release trigger or attack trigger. The release sounds a little bit like this. So every time you play, it opens the filter and it slowly kind of decays downward. By changing sort of the knob within the field, you can change how quickly this occurs. Really good for like plucky sounds and things that you need to be impactful, but also curtailed. As you scroll up on the knob, you get to the attack portion of the filter envelope. This is going the opposite direction, where it swells the filter, basically filter cutoff up. It's worth saying here that I tend to live in low-pass mode. There are 6 filter modes that can be accessed by holding the Alt button and changing the filter knob. You have a low bandpass and high pass filter in 2 flavors. A ladder filter, which is the original Meris sort of topology, as well as a state variable filter that is a little bit smoother, a little bit more maybe subtle, but kind of, I think, less potent overall. So I'll show kind of a couple of these modes, but we're going to spend basically the entirety of this video in the ladder filter low pass, because I think that's really where the magic happens, but also really, I think, what's most practically useful to us guitarists. We're in high pass here. State variable bandpass. State variable low pass. And right now the filter envelope is set to trigger based on playing, but you can actually set this as an envelope to your playing. A little bit less robotic and consistent, but way more organic, which can be really nice for certain kinds of sounds. And that's accessed by holding the Alt and pushing down that button. In addition to cutoff and filter type, we also have the ability to change the filter resonance or Q. By holding down the Alt switch and changing the filter envelope knob, we've now basically increased the overall resonance of the filter. Some resonance is useful, but it can get extreme, so we'll set it about halfway here. And this is where it starts to get really exciting for me. I'm going to kick on the dig and the illumine real fast to kind of show how I use this particular sound in an ambient setting. It's pretty magical. The sustain knob controls the sustain of the synth notes. Higher sustain will cause them to linger for a long time. Bringing that down causes them to fade out. The mix knob we've already kind of explored a little bit, and the last one is modulation. Without modulation, things are very straightforward, straight up and down. Synthesized pitches. Sounds great, but where the intrigue and the fun happens is when you start to kind of bring in this modulation. Finally, a couple more alternative functions that are worth knowing if you're kind of diving deep into the Enzo. First one is ring modulation. When you have the Alt switch pressed and you change the sustain knob, you bring in our ring modulation. Now if I bring in the filter envelope, I can modulate the overall carrier frequency of the ring modulation. Cause it to speed up or slow down. Now if you tie this to there's some really cool uses for the ring mod that kind of create those stuttering, intriguing sounds. And if you add this, I mean, we'll go back to the delay and reverb here because it is really neat. So if you're somebody who doesn't traditionally use ring mod, I would encourage you to explore, especially with the sort of envelope opportunities with this. Really neat. Additionally, we don't need outside delay because we actually have that inside of the Enzo. If we add the alt, here we bring in our delay mix. And this is controlled by the tap tempo on the face of the pedal. You have control over repeats on the alt function of the lower knob here for modulation. And the last one is portamento, which we should move to the mono mode to explore. In mono mode, like we mentioned, you can only have one pitch at a time. And if you add in portamento, it kind of creates this slew of transition between pitches that can be really musical and vocal and fun. So if you hear I'm playing that octave, it's sliding from one note to the other. Now if I increase the portamento, it takes longer to get from one pitch to the other. Probably don't want it that extreme for most applications. But it kind of creates some fun sounds and effects. For big lead lines, I find it really entertaining. The last alternative function is on this switch, you can change from a square wave to a triangle. So you really get two very different personalities with your synth. Let's talk about the filter section in the mono mode. All right, in mono mode, the filter envelope becomes this really fun, kind of funky filter that you can use to kind of manipulate sounds. Here I'm in the envelope mode with kind of a short attack. It should be noted that in mono mode, the pitching's the tracking is really, really strong. It can kind of follow your bends, and it just sounds very, very similar to what you're playing. Really, really fun for like bass synth kind of licks. Let's talk about one of my favorite uses for mono mode. We'll get kind of out of the envelope section and we'll bring the mix down a little bit more. And then also kind of gain up the sick ass for a second. If you're kind of tired of octave leads that feel just kind of weird, I would say that this is one of the best sounding kind of like driven octaves I've heard in a very long time. I prefer the octave down, but we'll do the octave up in just a sec. Pretty cool. To give the contrast of what it sounds like without it. Really, really cool. Now, everything we've talked about applies to all of these modes except for dry, but we'll go through poly real fast and kind of talk about how I've been using this. And it's been pretty simple, but basically all you do is you play a chord. Now you can manipulate it however you want. The decay filter on the Arp Mode is one of my favorite sounds in the entire pedal. Here you're hearing a little bit of ring mod and a little bit of that envelope, just kind of squeezing on things a little bit. The delay is time locked to the arpeggiator, so it sounds perfect together. A little bit of reverb. It's a jam and a half on its own. And finally, I think one of the most interesting modes, and probably one of the most oft overlooked within the Enzo, is the dry mode. Let's kill the ring mod for a second. Now, if you follow the channel, you know that low pass filter and swelling low pass filter on normal sounding guitar is one of my favorite things to use in place of a volume pedal. And the Enzo does this, and it does it in stereo, which is really, really cool because it lets you filter out things for like stereo mod and other things like that. But you can also do this kind of rad thing where you can tie it to the filter envelope. So let's bring up the attack and just try this out real quick. A little bit less resonance here. It also allows you to pitch shift the dry signal. really beautiful for that, but then you can kind of bring it over to quicker attacks. A pretty killer kind of envelope filter in both the attack and release kind of close side. In this mode, sustain kind of creates compression too, so it's pretty like spot on, like kind of funk tones. And then if you just want a delay pedal, but one of the most interesting uses I've found for this pedal in the dry mode is it kind of creates sort of like Pog-ish tones a little bit differently. If we bring up the drive just a little bit. Gets into like royal blood territory in the opposite direction, I suppose. But that's the Enzo. I think if any of that interests you, there's a ton to dive into, and there's probably a handful of things that we didn't have time to explore in full depth. But really, kind of my hope with this is that there's the opportunity that if any of this is interesting to you, if any of it is an exciting idea to have a totally different, basically instrument on your board at all times, but then also this really useful suite of effects and kind of other sort of sonic implements. It's compact. It's really, really easy to use. And if you like synths, but you're not going to lug one around, if you want something that you can get great synth sounds out of, but kind of in your wheelhouse if you're a stringed instrument player, this is, I really can't recommend it enough. But yeah, thanks for watching.